Chapter 5, in which the vizier takes a chance. And so at last the day came that King Shahryar had appointed, the day when he would take a wife once more. On that day he arose early, as was his custom, and though the truth was, there was hardly any purpose in his going to bed at all, ever since the night his first queen had died by her own hands, and thus dying had pronounced his doom, Shahryar had hardly closed his eyes. The images he saw there when he did so gave him no rest, no peace. In this he was like his brother Shahzaman had been before him. For several hours Shahryar went about his duties, as if this was simply a day like any other, trying to ignore the way his servants looked at him without looking out of the corners of their eyes. But just as the sun reached its zenith, Shahryar grew restless. He set his work aside. Gathering his robes around him, he roamed the halls of the great palace, paying no heed to the way courtiers shuffled swiftly out of the way, no attention to where he was going. He passed through halls as stone as dark as midnight, and halls as white as a scorching noonday sky, halls as green as the limbs of cedar trees, as golden as the sand that stretched around the palace for countless miles. But Shahryar's eyes saw none of these things, for they were focused inward on the landscape he had made within himself on the nights after his wife died. At length Shahryar discovered that his ramblings had made him weary. He gazed about and found his wandering steps had taken him to a small courtyard. In one corner splashed a fountain. Drawing near, Shahryar saw that the pool was tiled with stone so blue that looking down into the water was the same as looking up into the sky. And at the sight of this place he felt old memories burst into life within him, the way flowers will appear at an oasis in springtime. So Shahryar seated himself at the pool's edge, in the shade of a pomegranate tree that arched out above the water. He leaned back, looking up into its branches, and trailed his fingers in the pool. The water was as clear and bright as the surface of a mirror, but not once did Shahryar look into it. For it came to him as he sat that his own face had become a thing he had no wish to look upon, and thus it was that the vizier found him. When the vizier saw Shahryar seated by the pool that Shahrazad had loved, a very long time ago it seemed now, he was surprised to feel his spirit lighten. Into his heart, which all night had grieved, and even now afraid for the fate that would befall his daughter should she fail in her endeavors, he felt a small, bright surge of hope, the first hope that he had known since he had read Shahryar's proclamation and understood how far the young man he loved and honored had traveled away from his true self. Perhaps, the vizier thought, all might yet be well, for perhaps the king and Shahrazad were bound together in ways he himself could not fathom, but could hope that his daughter might. So, with his fine kid-skin slippers making no more than a whisper across the cobblestones, the vizier moved to King Shahryar and bowed low. For many moments Shahryar did not acknowledge the vizier in any way, instead continuing to sit gazing upwards and trailing his fingers in the water. But at last he withdrew his hand and dried it on the pant-leg, caring nothing for the way the water stained the silk. He made a gesture for the vizier to rise. "Well," Shahryar said softly. At the sound of the king's voice, the vizier felt a shiver ripple across the surface of his skin, the way a wind will make smooth water ridge and pucker. "I am a fool to hope," he thought. "How could there be hope when he sounds so cold?" "My lord, I bring you great news," he said, once more bowing low. "A maiden has come forward of her own free will, and asks that you accept her as your bride." At this news Shahryar sat up straight. "Well, who is she? What is her name?" he demanded brusquely. "She did not speak her name," the vizier answered, glad that he could do so honestly. There was no reason for Shahryar to know that the reason the maiden hadn't spoken her name was that she had no need to, for the vizier knew it as well as his own. "You would present me with a bride when you do not know her name?" Shahryar asked, sarcasm dripping from his voice like honey from a knife. The vizier knit his brow, as if in confusion, though his heart had begun to pound in fast, hard strokes. If Shahryar learned his bride's identity too soon, all would be lost. Thus the vizier had told Shahrazad as they made their plans the night before. And so they had decided how the vizier would speak upon this matter, and on his speaking all their hopes might rise or fall. "What difference does her name make, sire?" the vizier asked, his tone perplexed and querulous in the manner he and Shahrazad had agreed upon. "Will not one maiden serve your purpose as well as any other?" Shahryar shot to his feet, the color in his face high. Though the king's expression was frightful, at the sound of it the vizier felt a surge of hope for the second time. For until his queen's betrayal, Shahryar had always been true in his dealings with women as he had been with men, never viewing them as interchangeable, but seeking always to see each for herself alone. And so the vizier found the king's anger pleasing, for in this he seemed more like he had been before. "And you are certain she comes of her own free will?" the king demanded. The vizier nodded. "Absolutely certain, sire. I knew you would wish to be reassured of this, and so I questioned her closely. She is under no outside compulsion. She seeks only to spare you grief, her country turmoil, and others the fate which she knows must surely befall her." Shahryar began to pace, his brow knit, his movements brusque and choppy. "So," he said after a moment, "you would have me sacrifice a paragon." "Ooh," the vizier thought, "so this is the way the wind will blow. I am not the one who set the terms of the harsh bargain, O my king. You did that all by yourself. And if you no longer find them to your liking, do not make me your scapegoat." "A paragon? I cannot say, my lord," he said aloud. "To me she seemed a woman much as any other. Will you see her at the appointed hour or not?" Again the quick color flashed into Shahryar's face, and in that moment the vizier knew that he and Shahrazad had gambled and won. "What I have proclaimed, that will I do," Shahryar pronounced, his voice filled with angry pride. Satisfied that in his pride and anger the king would pursue the identity of his bride no further, the vizier bowed low for a second and a third final time. "Then I bring you to her as I have proclaimed it shall be," he said, "tonight, as the full moon rises. By its light you shall claim her as your bride." Now the evening, in the cool of the twilight, just before the moon appeared, the vizier went to his daughter's quarters. Shahrazad had dismissed her women and attended only by her sister Dinazad. At the sight of her father, the young girl ran to him and threw her arms around his legs. "Papa, tell her she must not do this," she cried. "My little one," the vizier said. With one hand he stroked his youngest daughter's head. "Did you think that I did not try?" "Well, try again," Dinazad pleaded. She lifted her tear-stained face to his. Just one more time. I'm afraid, Papa, so much depends on me. What if I do something wrong?" "You will do nothing wrong if you do as Shahrazad has asked," the vizier said. "Nothing less, nothing more. Go to your room now and wash your face. Let me speak to your sister alone." Dinazad did as her father asked, casting one look back at Shahrazad over her shoulders as she departed. When she was gone, the vizier moved to where Shahrazad had been standing silently all the while, dressed in her finest robes. They were white, and in them Shahrazad seemed to shine like a candle flame against the gathering darkness. "You are still set on this course, my Shahrazad? It is not too late. You can still change your mind." "I have not changed it, my father," Shahrazad replied. "Indeed, I think that I could not, even if that were what I truly wished. I cannot go back. Therefore I must go forward." To herself alone she kept the thought that it had been too late to change her mind in this from the moment she was born. The vizier regarded his daughter steadily, and what he saw in her face, though his heart still grieved, his mind was satisfied. "Come then," he said, "say one last farewell to your sister, repeat your instructions, and ease her mind. Then I will go forward as you have told me I must. I will take you to King Shahryar."